Lance, I'd like to begin with the allegations made in the sworn testimony of Betsy Andreu. She has given in sworn testimony the allegation that 10 years ago she was present in the hospital room and in response to a doctor's question said that you admitted to using cortisone, EPO, growth hormone, steroids, and testosterone. This was a sworn testimony. What do you say to her account?
Well, Bob, what I would do is encourage you to read the entire transcript and read the cross-examination.
And I have.
Read about the case, read about the fact that Dr. Nichols, one of the premier specialists in the world with regards to this, gave a sworn affidavit that said, obviously, number one, if a patient ever said that to him, it would be incredibly pertinent to a case with a cancer survivor. It would have to go in the records. There's 280 pages of medical records, constant interactions with doctors and nurses and specialists, never once mentioned. On cross-examination, Ms. Andreu was asked whether or not the doctors were male or female, couldn't remember. Were they wearing lab coats? Couldn't remember. Did they have clipboards? Couldn't remember. This is 3 days after I had brain surgery, double brain surgery. Do you think that in a hospital room, 3 days after brain surgery, weeks and weeks and weeks into the process, in a room full of people, one of them including my mom, I'm going to sit down and talk about this?
Well, let me ask you why she swore to this, and Frankie, your former teammate and former friend, also swore to this. They had to be compelled to testify. They did not want to testify. Why would they say this?
I was present for Betsy's deposition, and we asked her that question. We said, we said something to the effect of, what do you think of Lance Armstrong? And Bob, I've never been in a room where somebody looks straight across the table at you, right in the eye, and she goes, I hate him. And, other than that, I can't really elaborate.
I'd like to take you through some other issues and give you a chance just to put it on the record. I'll go back to 1995. One of your former teammates, Stephen Swart, he was riding with you as a Kiwi on the Motorola team. He has told ESPN on the record and on camera that back in '95, when the team was struggling, that you announced to the team that you were going to begin doping and you were encouraging other teammates to do the same. What do you say to that account?
Again, complete nonsense. Same thing. During the process of the trial, and I'll just remind you, this was a 3-week trial. All of this evidence was presented to 3 independent arbitrators. This all came out of the bonus case, which I was owed $5 million. And I'll just, again, remind you that the reward was for $7.5 million, so 50% over and above what they owed because of the salacious nature of their tactics. All this was presented. The notes from David Walsh's book and the interviews with Stephen Swart were presented. We asked Mr. Walsh on the stand, do you think Stephen Swart has any axe to grind with Lance Armstrong? Mr. Walsh said, absolutely not, has no personal vendetta, nothing against him. And we then presented him his own notes and said, well, could you read the last line of his notes, or of his interview with with Stephen Swart? Stephen Swart says, and I quote, and I don't want to talk this way, but I quote, "F Lance Armstrong, he's a f." And so if that's not a personal attack, if that's not a vendetta, I don't know what is.
Let me ask you about Dr. Prentice Stephan. He's a physician who was formerly the physician for the U.S. Postal Team before you arrived on the team. He was dismissed from the team. He recounted to us a phone conversation with you that after he had been quoted publicly talking about the Postal Team and the issue of doping, you called him up and he says that you said to him, I'm prepared to spend a lot of money to make your life miserable.
Not true. Prentice Stephan, I think, as his name, was not a part of the team when I was there. I hardly know him. The only interaction I ever had with him was when he was a team doctor for a Mercury cycling team, and I helped one of their young riders get care for testicular cancer. That's the first and only interaction I ever had with him.
I'd like to ask you about Emma O'Reilly. She kept what she claims is a detailed diary that formed a lot of the basis of the David Walsh book, L.A. Confidential. She details an incident where your team, she says, asked her to carry pills from Spain into France and personally delivered to you pills in Nice. Was that accurate?
Again, I hate to sit here and keep saying not accurate, but again, I'll remind you, and I'm sure you know this stuff, Bob. Emma O'Reilly was paid for her testimony in the book. Right. Now, what kind of author, what kind of publisher, what kind of a book actually pays sources for scandalous testimony or scandalous tidbits? I don't think that has any level of journalistic credibility. The other thing I'll tell you is that the diary in question was actually one that was recreated 2 to 3 years after the event supposedly happened. All of this, again, coming out in the trial.
Greg LeMond, let's move on to the 3-time champion, one of the great American racers, a man that you idolized at one point. He told me of a phone call that he says he received from you after he had criticized your involvement with Dr. Ferrari, the Italian doctor who was subsequently convicted of being involved with doping. And in that phone call, Lamont says that you said to him in a threatening tone, "I can produce 10 people to say that you took EPO."
Again, not true. And the other thing I'll say is that subsequently to the trial of Dr. Michele Ferrari, he's now since been vindicated and cleared. So that's just for the record. With regards to Greg, I have to say, I mean, as a young guy, I did idolize him in 1989. I mean, I think we all remember that incredible story coming back from getting shot and winning the Tour by 8 seconds, the smallest margin ever. I mean, he was a guy that quite literally put all of us into cycling because it was appealing to us at a young age. But yeah, I don't understand, you know, for a past champion, a great champion, one of the greatest athletes of all time, to be so involved in a case. I mean, I ask you, Bob, or I ask the viewers, why would you be so involved? I mean, Greg LeMond in this insurance case was so involved. He was calling people and taping them secretly, which is a felony in many states. Why would one of the greatest athletes of all time be doing that against another one? That's not normal.
Let me ask you, just when you look at the scope of some of the things that we've talked about, Betsy Andreu and Frankie Andreu and Stephen Swart and Dr. Stephan and Emma O'Reilly and Greg LeMond, taken as a group, why would, independent largely of each other, independently, why would they say these things that you say are not true?
I ask myself that every day. And it comes down to, certainly I've surrounded myself with, at times, questionable people, and I've not in the past been great with when riders leave teams or relationships end. Perhaps I haven't handled that properly, and I admit that freely, and personally people hate that. I would hate it too. But you know, why people would lie and tell stories, I mean, some of them obviously were paid, some of them had other motives, that's clear. But again, I gotta reinforce, and I don't know if it's to you or to whoever's interested, we have instigated a lot of action here. Every accusation that's come, every case that's come, we've sued people, we've opened ourselves up for investigation, we've opened ourselves up for inquiries, and our average, our batting average in all of them is 1,000. We've never lost.
Still to be heard, though, is the lawsuit in Britain, right?
Yeah, and so far we've won every round pretty much.
Let me ask you about, you've made news with the International Olympic Committee. You're not happy with the World Anti-Doping Agency. You've written a letter to the IOC essentially asking that Dick Pound be fired. Why?
Because of the 130-page Freeman report that came out. I mean, he was the independent investigator hired by our international federation to investigate the whole, to investigate the affairs of L'Equipe in August. I mean, whether or not
L'Equipe being the
Lance
French newspaper.
Right, whether or not he took EPO. So through the process and through the report, 130 pages, it outlined very clearly what happened. And listen, I mean, we're sitting here having a conversation about unethical behavior. Now, there's two people involved in this process. There's the athletes and there are the people that police the athletes. And both of them have to be ethical. Listen, nobody believes in doping controls more than me. I've submitted to all of them, whether in competition or out of competition. And listen, I'm not saying that my best defense is I've never tested positive. All I'm saying is that the last few years when you were supposed to tell the investigators or the drug testers everywhere you were, every day of the year, I did it. I mean, they would show up at my house in Austin, they would show up in New York City, they would show up in Spain, they showed up everywhere.
If your best defense is not testing positive ever, what is your best defense then, Lance?
My best defense is the fact that I've been doing this a long time, Bob. And I think all of us in sport, people who can be critical of sport or cynical, can say, you know what, that improvement was a little bit suspicious, or the change in the body type was a little bit suspicious. I've been doing pro sports for 20 years. I was a professional triathlete when I was 15. I turned professional in cycling when I was 21. That's 1993. I won the World Championships when I was 21 years old, beating a guy named Miguel Indurain, one of the greatest of all time. My career has never changed. There's never been a sudden spike in ability and never a sudden spike in skill. And most importantly, when they put the pressure on, when they put the bright lights on you, I didn't go away. I only got faster. And so I'm telling you, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. The pudding's not a bunch of people that are bitter and angry. The proof are the results, not just the race results, but the drug testing results, the investigations, the inquiries, the court cases. Haven't lost one of them.
7-time champion of the Tour de France, now retired, Lance Armstrong. We appreciate your time, Lance. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.